Who's that for?
Everyone.
Everybody?
If we weren't a wrestler, what would our job be? I grew up, loved to play any sport I could possibly do. And I've been asked this question before. So if I could coach and do it well, I would love to be a coach of any sport.
Well, you guys have an answer in mind? I actually was not considered an athlete at all growing up. I was a goof off and didn't know I was considered athletically gifted till far into my career. I actually was a bit of a nerd, and I think I was supposed to be smart. I think I was supposed to do something using my brain. Yeah, and I like to write. And I suppose if I hadn't decided to be a wrestler, I would have followed that path. And I still imagine I will transition over. I have so many writing projects. I just lack the dedication to make that accessible to you. But it's all up here.
Porno star. I think during my college days in the summer, I was a fireman. I think I enjoyed being a fireman. A lot of action, something new every day, a fulfilling job.
I grew up, and by the way, good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before in a context like this. I grew up wanting to be a veterinarian, and it wasn't until halfway through my first, and probably through my first year of college, that I realized that probably wasn't going to happen for me. So the two-part answer: I would have liked to have been a veterinarian as I was younger. I would have probably ended up what I was doing before I got into the wrestling business, which was sales. I was a sales manager for a food processing company, and that was really what I was good at. So in all likelihood, I would have been in sales in some capacity.
What do you want to do, little man?
Football.
Football.
Soccer.
The wrestling business is running a really different way now to how it was when you all broke in. So if you were young guys breaking in now, how do you think you would find it compared to how it was when you all started out? Do you think you'd be the success that you became if you were coming in a new system?
Me personally, everything evolves, and of course wrestling has evolved quite a bit. So I don't know if like my character would work so well nowadays, you know, with the hoe and the board and all. I think now the trends for more guys flying, more acrobatic type athletic moves. So I don't know if I'd be successful now as I was back then.
That's such a hard question to really wrap your head around, because it's such a different world now. When you think about who we had to look up to, who we were inspired by, and what the standards were back then compared to now, who the young guys, they had us, they were inspired by us. And I mean, we're not all even in the same generation. I was inspired by him and those guys, you know. And I mean, there was no such thing as MMA, and now you're born into this world where it's already a thing. I used to tell people that I was a kickboxer. They didn't know what that was. You had to explain what kickboxing was, and then, you know, if MMA was around, I'm sure I would have totally been driven to go that route, because I was into, you know, challenging myself, and I had that hunger to prove myself. But so that's why it's so hard, because now the standards have been, they are what they are now, and the world is what it is now. So coming in now, any of us would come in differently, you know what I mean? Like ready for today. And then I think what got us to reach our goals was the passion, the dedication, and that wouldn't have changed. So we would have adapted to today's world, but we don't have to now.
Do you think it's harder to break now, or was it harder to break back then?
I personally think that now there's a lot more fans in the business. Like, the one way it was so much different back then with the old school. By the time I was in the ring, I already couldn't act like a mark. You know what I mean? I wasn't allowed in the dressing room until I could act like I belonged there. And now it's not like that. Now, you know, a wrestler gets a tattoo of the date that the writers decided to put the strap on her. I hear, you know, and things like that just weren't allowed back then. So that's another way that it's changed so much. So I think I kind of think it's easier because now fans that watched us that might not have the old school training that we did are running shows or they're you know, wrestling in the shows, and there's a lot more. It used to be so much more closed door society, so I think it's easier now.
He just said something a second ago. Obviously, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, so that's the music city. No, but there is thousands of musicians that come to town, and anybody can get on stage with a guitar and say they're a singer. Are they good or not? No. And so, yeah, it may be easier or easy to get in, but I still believe to this day, and all four of us have different stories, but at the end of the day, we've all sacrificed family time, you name it, whatever it may be. We've all got a passion, and we've all got talent. And at the end of the day, whether you were broken in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever year you break in, if you've got talent and you've got a real passion, I mean, I'm going to disagree with Jim. He was played NFL football, incredible athlete. No matter what, if he would have broke in 2012 with his ability and passion and charisma, he would have adapted. So I really think no matter what year you break in, the two things that separate you from anybody else is talent and passion. And if you don't have both, go get another job.
Would you say they're the most important things? In the sporting world, probably, if you're trying to break through, if you want to be a footballer, if you don't have talent, you don't have passion.
Yes, you really got to love it. I mean, Eric, he stated earlier, he wasn't a wrestler, but God, what a businessman he is. He was Vern Gagne's coffee getter.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and then he ran the most successful wrestling business in the world at one time. But he had a passion for it. But also, that passion will only get you so far. He was a great broadcaster, great play-by-play. So I think you have to have both.
From you as a boss, Eric, what would you say is like, what do you look for in someone? Is it the same thing, the talent, the passion?
You know, it's hard to define. It's an intangible. If someone walks into the room, sometimes or they walk into the ring, sometimes it's a little tiny subtle things, the way they carry themselves, or the way they look into the camera, or the way they react naturally to someone instead of trying to memorize every single thing that they're saying. They feel their story and their reaction. They feel it, and when you feel it, you can see it, you can feel it differently. So what I'm looking for, what I used to look for, is more of an intangible than anything else.
Is there one person that you can remember that you maybe hired that went in, saw you, back, you knew it was going to be huge?
I really can't, because I've never really felt that way about, especially someone that was new, that hadn't really been to the dance before. There's been times that I hoped, someone that would make it to that level that either did or didn't, but there was nobody that I've ever laid eyes on that I said, that person's going to be a star. I wish I had that ability. I honestly, as much as I'm enjoying being here right now, if I had that skill, I wouldn't be here. I'd be on a beach throwing coconuts at tourists, counting my money.
Let's get another question, guys. Here we go, mate.
Eric, if you're in modern day on Raw or SmackDown, and you could make the NWO again, which 3 stars would you pick out of that roster, current roster?
Oh, I couldn't even, I don't even allow my brain to think that way. Sorry.
Right, let's get them.
If you could choose your perfect tag team partner, who would you choose? Bret or them?
Sabu.
For me, it's Sergeant Slaughter.
Too many again?
The question is, who would I choose?
Robert Fuller.
Tag team partner.
Tag team partner. Oh gosh. Actually, Kurt. That was been a unique tag situation.
What are your thoughts on XT and who do you think will be most successful in the main roster?
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
In NXT, who's going to be successful?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on XT?
I've been a huge Fergal Divot fan from way, way, way back. Nothing but money.
Yeah, myself, I don't watch too much wrestling nowadays. I joke, I said that'd be like a butcher watching cut meat on his day off. After 36 years, I don't watch a whole lot.
Ditto.
A lot of people are asking me what I think about Adrian Neville. Of course, that dude's awesome. I've known him for a while. I wrestled him here in Europe somewhere a few years ago when he was called Pac, and he wasn't quite so jacked up. But I saw him. I saw footage of him doing a 450 off the guardrail to the floor like a week ago. Those are they can have those standards. You know what I mean? Like when it becomes about always trying to outdo the high spot, someone's now doing a 450 with a corkscrew springboard to the floor, and I saw that, you know, and that's, you know, you gotta have more than that, but he totally does, and he's gonna be a big star.
We're going to have to jump in with the last question. Field your hand straight up.
This is for Mr. Bischoff. Just a quick question, were you given the heads up when DX were doing the invasion, and what was the atmosphere like backstage?
I was not given a heads up. I wish I would have been given a heads up and had the time to think about what was going on, because I didn't really hear about it. I was literally in the ring. I had an IFB on in my ear. I was in the ring, and I had my director telling me what was going on backstage. So I was kind of reacting in the moment. Had I, of course I have the luxury of 20/20 hindsight, so I can make myself sound really, really smart. But I think, even reflecting back to the way I used to do things back then, had I had 10 minutes to think about it, I would have let them in. Because it would have been phenomenal television. I wouldn't have been worried, they wouldn't have done anything too stupid, and we wouldn't have done anything too stupid. But just the fact that they were coming in and they would have been on the show would have A, taken the steam out of what they ended up doing very, very successfully, and B, it was just been awesome television to see that happen.
Are you guys all sticking around for your tables now, afterwards? Yeah. So guys, that's all we've got time for here now. So let's give them a big round of applause. One last thing.
Before you go, we got this little auction going on with a Jesse and Sean later, so I just wondered, would you be kind enough to maybe put some autographs on that for us?
Thank you very much.
Cheers guys. Thank you.
I was hoping to hear some Indagata Beaters.
We can do that. We can do that. That was quick.